Well, good morning again. Welcome back to the Markcast. We were just here yesterday talking USFL Week 1, XFL Week 9. Happy Seattle Kraken playoff game day, which is certainly the most important thing taking place today, other than the XFL Week 9 and USFL TV ratings here. Andy Murray has been crunching numbers all day. Surely not anything to be talked about today. How are you doing, sir?
Nothing whatsoever. I'm good, man. How are you doing? The back-to-back days. The first time we've done this.
This is the first time I said, hey, we might have an emergency TV ratings podcast, so there's enough to talk about. Ethan's excited here joining the show. But this is my thing. If we're going to argue on Twitter and message boards and whatnot, come hang out on the show. Let's talk through it. I think this is fun. I just purchased pending the Seattle Sea Dragons making it to the semifinals. I did purchase a standing room only ticket there at Audi Field. So if the Sea Dragons, I'm not going to go if it's the Battlehawks, but if the Sea Dragons go, you do have my promise. We will go there, as Noah reminds me, or a newbie here reminds me, with the Go Defenders. Andy, how was your morning prior to the XFL TV ratings coming in?
Very short. That's all I'm going to say. Just very, very short before that. Us West Coasters don't really have as much time, to process morning information before it comes out,
So we'll go through all this. We have some comparisons. The light of God is shining through here right now. Let's see if I can destroy my living room as I fix that here. But I will pull this up first. This is what you're here for. And then we'll get into some comparisons with XFL and everything else. So this is via Mike Mitchell, USFL opening TV ratings, Fox, NBC, FS1. League returns competing with the XFL for viewership. So Mike's got all the breakdowns here. The USFL kickoff game Saturday afternoon, Fox, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. We have the Stars at the Memphis Showboats, averaged 437,000 viewers. A year ago, the league debuted the game on Fox, averaged 1.43 million, and the 1.52. Remember, they did that simulcast back there. Now, obviously, different landscape here. XFL also playing, spring football fatigue. We don't have the USFL, everything coming in. What do you make of the initial ratings here coming out for the first game?
I'm surprised they're sub 1 million. I really am. I thought they would at least break 1 million in the first week on broadcast television on Fox. I really thought that was going to be the case. Considering the fact that Fox put in more resources this time around, the amount of advertising that was put in, the lead up to the advertising, obviously there was a Super Bowl ad. There was ads in most Fox programming. I saw stuff all the time on FS1. Fox's main channel. I'm surprised, and I know NBC's not involved in this first telecast, but I just thought there would be more numbers. I'm not sure. Like, maybe it's just the fact that the NBA was going on. Obviously, you have your cross competition with another league now, which is unprecedented. We talked about that. We talked about splitting attention, splitting hairs. You're gonna get people in different corners now, and this is what's gonna happen. But I did think there would at least be a few more on that channel. I really thought it was going to break 1 million. So I am surprised that wasn't the case here for the Saturday games. The Sunday games I expected, because they're in hubs without really home crowds, right? There's not the people that are going to be there like there are going to be for Birmingham and there are going to be for Memphis. So I expected that. And also FS1's not going to draw as much as the main network channels. It's cable. So that makes sense. But yeah, just surprising. Honestly, it is surprising. I really thought Saturday was going to do better.
I'm really surprised. And we have all the ratings here. We have the XFL ratings, then we have everything from a year ago and kind of all that stuff. I'm surprised what I'm always curious to me. NBC always seems to draw better on the USFL ratings. I know they're paying Fox, they're kind of licensing that, but even last year they always seem to draw more, whether it was Saturday, Sunday on that. The 8:37, you're going up. It was kind of split in between. We had the XFL games ending, then we had the XFL games starting. I surprised that was the big kind of show boat, no pun intended, kind of showcase of the weekend. I am surprised they sub million viewership for that, considering that back in 2022 we had those the really killer ratings here. No, I have that wrong here we go. because back in here, I'll pull it up here. Let's go back to this and I'll get the correct article up. Saturday, the Birmingham, surprising even more about this, the primetime game, because remember the one was at 4:30 Eastern, the 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 864 on that. And we talked about that yesterday, the rating or the attendance being down a little bit. Are you surprised that the primetime game was even less than the, slightly more than the afternoon?
Yeah, I am. I thought that was the big unveil, right? That was the new market. That was the new hub. That was a new franchise. Well, new in the sense of this iteration, the USFL, but an old one that had come back from the 80s. And instead, there just wasn't the amount of attention that I thought there would be. Birmingham, I know they're defending champions. It's a rematch for the Generals from last year in the beginning of the week. And it is, it is a Saturday night time slot. It is more prime time ish, but at the same time, I really thought that there would be more attention towards this Memphis debut. And for it to be the third highest of the entire weekend was not what I was expecting. I thought it would be the top one, to be honest. I really did. For Michigan and Houston, the Michigan Houston was just so funny. You're right though. Like NBC does draw really well. You're right. It always does draw well, and it drew really well last year as well. So even the network that created or at least resurrected this league is not even outdrawing its like partner network, which is really bizarre. Like they're not even. I don't know if NBC is advertising for it nearly as much, and obviously Fox puts out more promotional materials and PR and all of this stuff. So it is odd that NBC is the one that's getting more numbers here. I'm not exactly sure, like if people just have like like a network preference here, or like they have alliances. I don't know, because that is odd. I'm trying to figure out why in the world it's getting more numbers here in this case, and in general it gets such good numbers.
Yeah, I wanted to pull up here. So the XFL, and we're going to go through this, but the key thing to remember, and I've seen a lot of online of, like USFL got 3.5 million, and XFL got, and it's not a coping thing. It's an analytic. It's like I guess having a brain thing. You need to look on here. We have ABC, ESPN2, ESPN, and ESPN for the XFL Week 9 TV ratings. So you have one network, 3 cable, that you have to pay to belong to. USFL, we have Fox, NBC, and then FS1. So you have 3 network windows that are always going to draw more. One cable, so it's not, and this is not a Reed being a homer thing. This is like there's facts that are involved in this. That more people get NBC, ABC, and Fox than do ESPN, FS1, Peacock, whatever the hell numbers you want to talk about. So yes, USFL absolutely drew more ratings this weekend than the XFL. They also, from my math, have about a 50% decline from 2022, and we can get into that as well. Back to the USFL, the 974, crazy to me, always for the NBC, and then rough, but still I think really, honestly, really respectable, especially going against the XFL had tailored off the Sunday night New Orleans at Pittsburgh there over in Memphis. Like I thought that was really good. I guess that would have been in Birmingham. I don't think that would have been as good. Are you surprised by the 483? To me, that's a very impressive rating.
On FS1, no, that's pretty good. And considering that it's the Maulers, who no one wants to watch, as is being featured on this in this game. New Orleans, I mean, you don't know because obviously they have a new quarterback, they have a new head coach, they kind of have a couple different pieces. Maybe you're getting, who knows, maybe you're getting the Cloud Bethel Thompson enthusiast. Maybe that's part of it on a Sunday afternoon. I mean, I'd have to look again, but I believe there was some NBA playoff action going on at that moment simultaneously. Maybe I think the tail end was Suns Clippers, and there might have been another game. So there were some things going on that afternoon, but it's at least encouraging that FS1's drawing those numbers. I guess if you're Fox, if you're the USFL, are you trying to take more stock in the fact that you got more numbers, you got decent numbers on a different network on the cable channels, or are you trying to kind of spin this as far as like why there was not as many on your network channel simultaneously while there's a bunch of other products going on? And look, we have to discuss about this, like what is really drawing people to other products, because last year, I mean, you were still in the same situation, same boat, besides the fact that the XFL is not around at that time, but other sports were, so Is the XFL drawing all those numbers away from season 2 here? And also we talked about the curiosity factor, right? When you talk about like the initial hit of a league is going to draw those numbers because people want to know what it is. Well, people know exactly what the USFL is at this point. There's no mystery, and we talked about that yesterday. Like there's no mystery. There's a lot of continuity. It's very structured. We know exactly what it is, and for a lot of people, maybe that just wasn't good enough to overly impress them to come back again, seeing that there were still hubs, and still seeing kind of the same operation, or at least the same mentality. With the XFL, it was hard to say because, well, we knew the 2020 version. We didn't know what this version was. So are those numbers going to drop for week 1 next year in February? We will have to wait and see like what's going to happen with that first game. Because this year was 1.7 million for that Vegas game, the Vegas and Arlington game. Let's see what happens next year. So that's the thing. Like what are people's expectations? What do they know? And are they going back to it, or are they going somewhere else instead when the second version comes around?
I think, and so we talked about this yesterday, and how kind of, I think, harsh, we were, people were, whoever, to USFL last year, attendance, TV ratings. It was such an anomaly where the XFL had gone away. People wanted something back. You felt like, we didn't complete this journey right. We've been on this for 2 years. XFL is like week 5. So then we finally get back. I mean, you saw the bonkers numbers that Stefan and Zach did for their YouTube. Like there was such a weird like aura around the USFL last year. I think like Mark's USFL his uniform video had like 50,000 views or 40,000 views. Like there was such a weird like, okay, we're so anticipating that, right? Ratings were out of control that first weekend. It was great. I do think now that we've seen the XFL this year and we've seen the USFL this year, I think this is more the benchmark. And like I said, I think 500,000 viewers on the FS1 on a Sunday night for a program that you own outright anyway and can put on your on demand and everything else, I mean, I really think is superb. To me, it's the network ones. I don't know what they want in that. Obviously, we're looking at the XFL week 1 that I can pull up. They had above 1 million on that. We can compare that or not, but I don't know if they're looking for above 1 million on network. We need to get more clarification on that. But I think 500,000 on cable on a Sunday night is really nothing to sneeze about. Same with the XFL.
Yeah, and I think they might have had that number similar to last year because if you recall, they didn't have that with the Pittsburgh game because they had the delay on Monday night, so it didn't work out in their favor. And that Monday night game, I think you said had about 260,000, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. And so if that's a drop off anyway. But yeah, I think 500,000 on that. I'm pulling up the 2023 XFL week 1 ratings. I want to get it more clear here, so let me get that pulled. Anything else on this? Anything else with the NBC Fox, the simulcast, the double on Saturday?
No, I mean, again, I just thought there would be a little bit more attention in terms of those numbers, and it's a bummer because I think those are your marquee matchups. Those are your home matchups. That's where your fans are. That's where you can tell people, or at least show people, oh, hey, look, people are showing up for the games, because those are the games you want people to watch. Not necessarily Michigan Houston when there's like 200 people in the stands. I don't even know how many there were, but we'll never get those attendance numbers, so we can just be left to guess.
This is I wanted. I knew XFL board had it here clean on here. If you look back, and I understand different competition, in the fall or earlier in the winter, right? Every time is the best time of year to play football until it's not. I heard that all last year. Spring, late spring is the best, and then oh my god, we have the Stanley Cup playoffs now, and we have the that we're playing with the NBA playoffs. Week 1 XFL back on February 18th, 1.57 million on ABC, which to me was disappointing at the time, right? I remember, a north of 3 million for that back in 2020, which obviously we're living in a different time frame, and kind of anyone that's comparing 2020 to 2023 would probably be delusional at this point. But 1.14 on FX, which is a really, honestly, like scary good rating, I think, for a cable network. 1.57 on ABC, and then at 918 on ESPN. So to me, that 918 on ESPN late Sunday, comparable to FS1. I don't have the clearances in front of me of what the difference is of that with the USFL, but I I don't think demonstrably to me, XFL week 1 performed better than USFL week 1. If you can please tell me if you think I'm crazy.
I mean, it obviously did. It broke a million 3 times and almost broke it 4 times in this case. Now, again, this is this is network television twice, same, and Fox and NBC combined for 3 network television debuts this time around for season 2. So you take that as well. Obviously, the cable. You have 2 more cable broadcasts here with ESPN and FX on that Saturday and that Sunday game, and they were still able to get those numbers. I mean, I just think the fact of the matter is, like, more people are going to be paying attention to football at that very moment because their minds are fresh off of the Super Bowl, and there's not as much competition at that moment. There's no baseball. The NBA is in the middle of the regular season. You haven't hit March Madness quite yet. So there's nothing really serious in February. So you can take advantage of that. March is where the numbers go down. We saw that. March was kind of a cavern, and it really hit hard for the XFL. So it's a matter of, like, can you take those hits later in the season, the middle of the season? For USFL, I mean, they started to dip a little bit in the middle of the season last year too as well. You have, at that point, you have the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs. You start getting, warmer weather, so people start, going outside and doing other things. It's just a matter of, like, what are people doing? At least with the XFL early in the season, it's still cold enough that most places you don't really want to go outside. Attending the games is also depends on which region it is, may not be super amicable for people, but I think that's why you got those ratings there. So again, it depends on, like, what their benchmark is going forward, if that's what they're going to anticipate next year or if they expect better.
I'm pulling up here. I get a lot of questions talking. We want to compare USFLs, and I have my tweet here. I'm looking to get for that. You just see it's a tremendous here. Why don't you just vamp for a minute? I'm trying to pull up this tweet. That's a little easier.
Well, I'm also, like, we're gonna have to see. Also, obviously, we're looking at the week 2 ratings here for the XFL. That I don't believe they've broken a million since that point for any of their network or the cable broadcast. I'm not sure. I'd have to scroll down, but I don't think they have. I'm trying to remember. Maybe one game, but I don't think they've really done that since that point, since that week 1. So again, it's like the amount of exposure. Obviously, they didn't have as many ABC games. The number of network games is going to be a much higher for the USFL this season than it is going to be for the XFL. We talked about that. They're going to have more exposure on their main network and in better spaces, and also more consistent time slots than the XFL. We've obviously, that's one of the biggest things that both leagues have to get right, is the consistent schedule, which when you're one, it's hard to do that because you're trying to convince advertisers that you should get priority over other events. Shouldn't be fighting with pickleball and maybe, betting or horse racing or whatever. And instead, you should be getting priority in that case. Okay, week 6, there we go. That was over 1 million for Sea Dragons and Guardians. So, that's another thing. Like, are you going to be able to prove to them the second time around that you should be getting that priority? XFL obviously was trying to work on that, and Disney has responded. They've moved up some of that programming to ESPN time slots when they weren't previously. So clearly they saw the numbers and they adjusted accordingly as the season went along. So again, are they going to be able to get that priority going into the second season like USFL was able to this season?
Yeah, so I have this here. So this is Mike's, right? So we're talking, we talked about this, the 837, all that. So Mike has his article, but this Breakers Insider put it more easily just so we can read it on here. So if you want to compare week 1, it was 3.07 million, right? We had the simulcast, the generals. So it was about half that per game. We had 2.15 NBC viewers for basically the same game, Houston Gamblers and Michigan Panthers. Same time, same network, kind of all that kind of stuff. 2.15. We had the 770 for the New Orleans Breakers, Philadelphia Stars later game that day. And then, like you said, there was the delayed game for the Monday of the 268. So if you want to compare, if I'm comparing 2.15 of NBC on Michigan Panthers in April of 2022, and I'm getting 974 this year Sunday, It's a 50% drop. So I'm happy to compare USFL 2022 season, week 1 numbers to USFL 2023 week 1 numbers if you would like. It is about a 50% decline, which is not surprising. That's what the XFL saw, coming when you do from week 1 to week 2, whatever. But they're down. USFL week 1 ratings are down this year compared to last year, whichever way you want to cut it, whether you cut it by network or whether you cut it by the mass or whether you cut it by whatever. Every number is about half of what it did last year.
Yeah, no, I did some calculations. So from game 1, game 2, game 3, and game 4. So in order. So game 1 last year for USFL was Saturday night. That was that Birmingham game. Compare that to game 1 with Memphis and Philadelphia this year. That's about a 73% drop. That's from the first game. Second game, which was Birmingham, New Jersey, from this year from last year, which was Gamblers and Panthers. That was a 59% drop from last year. Now, Gamblers Panthers was Sunday morning, as opposed to Birmingham, New Jersey, which was Saturday night this time. So keep that in mind as well. And then game 3 from the game 3 last year, which was Stars and Breakers, and then this time it was Gamblers and Panthers. You had a 20% drop. They were almost about the same time slot. Basically, it was just that Sunday afternoon versus Sunday morning comparison. And then the one that did go up, though, actually was this New Orleans-Pittsburgh game. It went up by about 38%, but that's because, again, that Pittsburgh game last year got pushed to Monday night because of the thunderstorm and caused a delay. So,
and I don't hold that. I don't hold that 268 against, I don't hold that against USFL, but they could not control that.
Right. That's weather. They couldn't control that. So who knows? Maybe that number would have been about the same. I don't know. Hard to say because that would have been Sunday night. That also would have been Sunday night. So I'm not sure. That's Sunday night versus Sunday afternoon here. So yeah, I mean it is down across the board, but it was the down across the board for the for the XFL as well. You know, when you took that from 2020 to 2023, of course it was all down. Again, because you didn't have as many networks devoted to that product as there were before. It's interesting. I mean, that amount of promotional energy is not there for both of these leagues. I think that's the kind of takeaway I have, as opposed to 2020, which was Vince McMahon and his power of just pushing it as much as he could. A lot of nostalgia for the XFL 2001, which a lot of people remembered as the last iteration, and obviously was not even close to that. So that's kind of my takeaway here.
I just got this in. This is just sent to me email here, and it was like a press release with the link to the email. I do get the USFL emails. Kicking off the USFL's historic second season for Memphis and Birmingham. The USFL scored a strong week 1 viewership across Fox, NBC, and FS1, a 4% increase over season 1. 784,000 viewers on average tuned into season 2 USFL games across Fox, NBC, FS1 in week 1, up 4% over season 1. Are we including the Monday night game in that with the 268? I don't know how we averaged 784 on that.
I'm not sure either. That's odd. Because I would like to know what the numbers were included on that. Also, the week 1 numbers that doesn't seem to add up, does it?
I don't know how you get a 4% increase on that unless you take in that. But even still, if you take in that 268, again, I don't want to besmirch our friend DJ here, but I don't know how we get 784 on that. I would love somebody to crunch the numbers and know how we get a 4% increase of 784 with a 50% drop in ratings across the way.
See, I feel like I have to check my math now every time I see these kinds of graphics, and you have your broadcaster saying things like, "Oh, there was around 30,000 people in Memphis." I'm like, that's not gospel. That's not an official number. I mean, this is an official number, but that doesn't seem to add up in my mind. I need to go back and look at that because I don't know how that's possible. There's a 4% increase.
I don't know. I would love to know how the math works out on that. I am very dumb with math, and if there's something that I'm missing, but I don't know how you go from 3 million 2.1 to 974 and say it's a 4. I don't, unless you're including that Monday night game, which drug down the average. They're saying 784 for the whole season. Tuned into season 2. So are we basing USFL total season 1 viewership against USFL season 2 average viewership?
Like for the opening weekend?
Like, are they taking here? Like, I'm trying to figure this out. Are they taking the average viewership of USFL season 1, which obviously would have been, I think Mike did the numbers. It was about 850,000, right? If we take the whole season, right, the season viewership average, and then we have the 1 week then of season 2. Are we basing 10 weeks of 1 against 1 week of season 2 and calling it a 4% increase?
Yeah, see, that's bizarre. Why would you do that? Especially
Well,
when you
I don't. I'm happy. Again, I'm happy to be proven wrong on here. If someone can show me the math on here, I would be. I would happy to be corrected on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what they're talking about here, because if that's the case, then cool. Then let's wait till see what happens with the other weeks. So that's that
Yeah,
graphic is really that graphic's bizarre.
Yeah, this is what it seems to be, and that's my math. Is because it's the opening weekend this year compared to the 2022 average. So that would make sense. That would make sense because obviously USFL season 1 peaked, went down. We have the average viewership on that. I think I can pull up the article talking about that, and then we compare it then to that. That makes sense to me.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting way of putting it. I mean, I guess because you don't want to directly compare those numbers from week 1 from last year to week 1 this year, obviously, but that's something that I'd have to have to put more number. I just put in the numbers for today for the week 1 comparisons, but that I think that's something that you're going to have to obviously keep track of the entire season as we go along, per average, to see what those numbers end up shaking out to be.
I want to talk about this, and I do want to see if I can pull up the average USFL back in that day. Listener Seth sent this along to me, and there's a lot of naysaying going on in the chat right now. But if we want to look at the positive here, because I don't, it doesn't matter to me. I like kind of just sitting there and reading all the comments and everything. Like I don't take a single thing that anyone says personally. But if we want to look at the positive here, 1.548 million viewers watch spring football during the noon time slot on Saturday. That was when kind of the XFL, all that kind of, considering that 1.5 million viewers were watching USFL or XFL spring football that did not exist 2 years ago during that time frame. Talk about that.
As far as like this, more people tuning in at that exact time.
Well, just the fact that we had 1.5 million people watching spring football that would not have been able to watch that 2 years ago.
I know. I think that's huge. I think that's exposure. And I think people are starting to accept that idea. And I think, look, honestly, it's a net positive that you have 2 leagues playing at the moment, because people are now accepting the idea that this is going to be a reality, that this is not just a fleeting thing that's going to disappear in 2 days, because that's what happened with the AAF. That's what happened with UFL. That's what happened with all these leagues. A lot of these leagues. The XFL disappeared because of COVID. You had so many leagues that have gone underwater. You have to normalize the idea of, okay, they're going to survive. Honestly, I'm seeing more comments maybe from people that are not as wired in as we are, that are saying more so that the 2 leagues need to merge than that they need to die, which is, look, that's a positive step. That's a step in the right direction. Now, whether you can get people to agree on that idea, that's a whole nother thing. But if you're at least allowing people to accept the idea of, okay, maybe this can happen, maybe this can work, where are we going to go? You have to work on, obviously, the information campaign for both of these leagues, because it's just all over the place. I feel like you're going to have to start working on really educating people on the differences between these leagues. But that's the kind of confusion you're going to get. Like, I just knew at some point this past weekend, that someone was going to make some comment about the USFL and say like, oh, this is, why is this? Obviously, this is being run by The Rock, It's like, no, it's not. That's the XFL. Like, that's a different league. Or, oh, this is doing this because of this. And it's like, no one knows really like which league is doing what, because not as many people are as in tuned in that, no, those are different leagues, right? People, I get confused all the time for people who are like, so which one are you covering right now? It's the USFL. I'm like, I cover both, the USFL and XFL. I'm like, oh, there's 2 of them. Like, it's just always, there's always some sort of like filling in the blanks that has to be done. But at least again, people are accepting the idea that, okay, this is in the space. This is consciously, I understand that this exists. That's something that has to be done first. And that's what both leagues are trying to do right now.
All right, so I absolutely figured it out. So thank you everyone in the chat for helping me, because like I said, Reed is math dumb, like super, and especially when we're trying to do this stuff on the fly. So we see here 784,000. So if we look here, our good friend Mike Florio, USFL averaged 715,000 viewers in 2022 regular season. So that is absolutely where that number comes from, that we took the combined average of all of USFL season 1, divide 10 weeks, whatever. We took the viewership that was the, really good, still down 50%, but really good USFL week 2 viewership. It is up because we are averaging the week 1 average of season 2, all 4 games together, which obviously going to be higher. We're averaging that versus 10 weeks of declining ratings, which any TV show, any football league has declining ratings, but that is how we get a 4% increase from season 1 to season 2. Fascinating. I'm so we cracked the code on that. I'm so glad. Are you happy we were able to figure that out?
Yeah, no, I'm glad that we cracked the Da Vinci Code on that one. So
I do. I feel like I earned something today.
Well, here's another thing we have to think about too. So obviously we have the XFL regular season finishing out here. We have the playoffs. Where do those numbers go once that's done? Are those going to be going to the USFL after the fact? That's something we haven't experienced either. What's going to happen? We obviously talked about March Madness, obviously getting in the way of the XFL, and that's a national audience. That's a huge national audience, but that's a different sport. What happens when you have a similar sport that crests and finally finishes its season? And now what do you do with those viewers after the fact? Like, do they come back over and do they start adding to those numbers mid-season, or does it still dip? That's another question we still have to answer. And we'll know that on week 5 of the USFL, I think right after the XFL championship game in mid-May. So some towards the end of May, we'll have a better answer.
I'll be fascinated. I'll be fascinated to see if it is viewer fatigue, if it is. Again, like I said, I think that USFL really did capitalize on. There was such a lacking last year of this, and even like our viewership and everything. I mean, you can look across the board that February, March, April leading into last year. We did. Andy and I were in Birmingham. We did 3,000 viewers last year for the live show. Did 1,000 this year for the live show. There's a demonstrable decline. I don't know if that is XFL related. I don't know if that is USFL related, that people are bored. Maybe there just was a lot less stuff to do last April and people were really excited for this and now they're not. I think we can build back up to that. I'm not saying that this is like the peak it's ever going to be, but it was just a weird confluence of everything last year. They had just pushed back the XFL with the CFL talks. People were ready to go. The CFL season was done. It was just weird last year. I just can't explain it any other way than that.
There's a lot of qualifiers, and I think that's what's so hard to put all this math together. There's no organic method as far as like there wasn't any sort of interruption between these ratings from last time to this time. Like 2020 XFL was still running off of, normal times when there was no pandemic that had interrupted everybody's lives, right? There was no other spring league. There was no, like, the concept of it existing was still, we weren't sure if that was going to continue. We were supposedly going to get this in 2020 if the AAF had survived. They didn't. So that answer never came. But now you have this combination of, all right, simultaneous leagues, and you had, as you mentioned last spring, maybe there wasn't as much to do. Society was still trying to kind of piece itself back together, and that was something to look forward to. Well, now everything's kind of become normalized, and we've gotten back to it. But now things have changed. Landscape has changed. Maybe audience tastes have changed. Streaming versus the network and cable numbers, which again, what are the streaming numbers? That's something we have to account for as well. The Peacock numbers for NBC or for ESPN Plus, like when do we get those? How much is that factoring in? That is like one of the greatest mysteries in this entire equation is like, you're not going to have people who are just regularly watching TV. So where are these other numbers coming from? And do we ever get access to these numbers, which we have yet to at this point? So I mean, yeah, it's just a lot of qualifiers, and it's a lot of different information, a lot of different, expectations, and where this was before then. It's at some point we might just have to stop comparing to like before, the before times.
I can't handle the XFL 2020 comparisons anymore. I really, and I don't, like I said, I didn't want to compare the USFL 2022 ratings, but everyone asked me to. Like, I don't want to compare the 50% decline from last year to this year, but yeah, sports is changing, man, and people, it should be on streaming, it should be on whatever. Like, but I am really tired of the XFL 2020 is a very different time, in case you weren't aware.
Yeah, clearly. I think everybody thinks they can have a giant piece of that pie because they look at the NFL ratings and go, well, look at that. If we get a percentage of that, but that's a whole nother, bucket of worms. That's a completely different circumstance, and that's hard to really compare to that. It really is.
I see the comments here, as Jared talking, whatever. This God, I don't know who this God is, has commented about a million times. I will give him one on here because he's talking. I hate to ignore everybody. Ratings are down because they have competition head to head. That's the fact you're forgetting about. I understand that. Andy and I have been podcasting XFL and I have even before that for years now. I'll tell you, there's a lot more XFL and USFL podcasts right now than there were a year ago, than there was 2 years ago. I'm very honored that people still choose to watch us and listen to us, and we get good viewership. And I think there's always going to be, you're always going to be head to head. You're going to be head to head against the XFL. You're going to be head to head against hockey. You're going to be head to head against baseball. You're going to be head to head. There's never the right time. And I think that you see the product. I said yesterday on the cast, watching the USFL it is football. There's no denying that. You're putting on a pair of jeans. You know exactly what it is. And I think there's a big number of people that want that. I don't always love the personality that the XFL has and all of this stuff either. There are obviously people that appeal to that. Plenty of people hate me. Plenty of people want to watch us talk. Like, that is what it is. But just being head to head and having other competition is no excuse for underperforming on its own.
I mean, the number.
Jenna checking in. Jenna's
here we go. There's Jenna.
A whirlwind of the last 40 minutes here.
Wow. Good to have her come checking in. Yeah, I mean, like, that's the thing. The landscape keeps changing. It always is changing. You know what was really fascinating to me was a couple weeks ago we talked about comparison ratings. I was talking about the women's NCAA basketball championship. Listen, I have grown to enjoy the sport and enjoy it for what it is and enjoy watching individual players. 10 years ago, if you told me, like, oh, NCAA women's basketball is going to be serious competition in terms of drawing numbers from a football related product, I would not have believed you. I would have said, okay, sure. Like, that's something that just doesn't factor in. That doesn't, like, yeah, people watch it, but I don't think it's going to draw serious numbers. Championship game between LSU and Iowa drew 10 million people. Like, that was on ABC. Like, it is serious competition, and that's your network, basically. Like, that's, you're trying to get games on XFL games on ESPN, and here you have this game over on ABC that's drawing all this attention. There's so many options, a bevy of options. You have teams, you have FCS football teams that you can watch. You can watch high school. You can watch, random sports. We've talked about, obviously talked about pickleball. We talked about horse racing. We talked about, whether it's, professional slapping or wrestling or darts, or, like, there's just so many sports viewing options because it draws live TV audiences, right? We've all figured out, all these networks have figured out, like, this is the only thing that's really getting live numbers outside of, like, maybe a giant news related event that's really going to draw these numbers, and maybe like a super mega popular TV show. And even then, people are probably going to stream it these days. Sports is the only, like, live content that really draws those numbers. So of course there's going to be more competition. That's why these leagues exist. This is why these two leagues are here. This is why Fox themselves are like, we're going to run this league because it's going to get these kinds of numbers for us. So yeah, there's always going to be competition, especially now there's going to just be more competition. I don't know about you, Reed, but like I'm as a longtime sports fan, this is overwhelming. Like I as a kid, I thought I was able to tune in enough stuff and have enough options. This is like an overwhelming number of things that you could easily choose to spend your time on instead. So yeah, you're going to be splitting eyeballs no matter what.
Yeah, no, tell my wife that. Too much pressure. Gregory, I will respond to this, Gregory, longtime commenter and friend of the podcast. I agree, but this is what this show is today. If you want, Andy and I did both yesterday. We'll do more football breakdown. I got a good guest coming up on Friday. This is what the show is today. We're talking TV ratings. I appreciate that. We'll talk gameplay. We had a whole breakdown of every roster with John Vogel and Andy and Rick Saratella and everyone else for the Friday USFL. This is what today is. God has one more comment, then we'll get to it. USFL doesn't have Vince or The Rock to help push it. USFL earned everything on their own without some huge celebrity or brand like the WWE, except, of course, the trademarks they purchased from the hard work that Steve Earhart and everyone did back in the 1980s. And then also Fox and NBC pushing it and airing Super Bowl ads to support it. So I do enjoy this. I enjoy dissenting opinions on here. I have no problem with that. Andy, you had something to say.
I just wanted to say, like, I mean, look, you're right. Those comparisons are tough to make, and obviously the promotional value between all those is really hard to maintain. But yeah, like, also to Gregory's point, I was going to say, look, I spent about 2.5 hours analyzing games yesterday, combined Marcast and Sam Shady's network yesterday. So don't worry, there's plenty of time for that. But I've kind of exhausted all those tanks for this week.
This is the rating show today. This is the rating show.
I'll keep talking, but like I put in my work yesterday on that. I did a double shift basically. So, but yeah, I mean, look, ratings are going to matter because people want to know about them and people want to know what's going to happen with, the attention that both leagues get, because guess what? They're in competition and they make it a competition. Both leagues make it a competition. Okay. Like they're the ones putting all this in PR information, right? Like, they're trying to tell us, attendance numbers and ratings numbers and, oh, this is, we're working on this. Like they push it out themselves. So of course, if they care about it, I think people are going to start caring about it too. And that's just how it is. Like that's the nature of the beast. And look, is it the most important? In my opinion, no. I'd rather talk about the football too, and I love talking about the competition and talk about the players. I, of course, love talking about the players, but it's gonna be something that people pay attention to because it's very much factored into the survival of both of these entities.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that knows me, and then we have a couple questions here. Anyone that knows me, this is my bread and butter, right? And that's fine. And I've had a million people say Reed doesn't know football. That's why I bring on people like Andy and John Vogel and Rick. That's why I bring on every smart person we do. This is my wheelhouse. I had more fun yesterday talking about the attendance in Birmingham and Kurt Menefee lying about the attendance, and like that's my wheelhouse. That's fine. Like I'm happy to have if we bring on the smart football to talk, smart football people to talk football. But it is all related, and I'm sorry. Putting we got like 50 people watching right now, doing the TV ratings, freak out Maury, it's your father versus XFL Week 10 playoff preview. Like I try to combine all that as much as I can, but you do get people love talking about this stuff, and I have to do, I got to go where the viewership goes. If I was doing CFL weekly breakdowns and getting the viewership we were getting on this, we would do that.
Well, like Skip and Shannon, we got to talk about the Lakers and the Cowboys, right? That's that. We haven't hit those. Oh, we haven't hit those points yet either. By the way.
No, yeah, Gregory. I know my Haggis has both. Yeah, no, I feel fortunate. Like it gets to this, but this is the fun stuff to me. I look so forward to Tuesday mornings right now and seeing the comments on Twitter. It is truly a delight because it's just us in this world. Like they don't care. They're up there in their ivory towers, and just remember that. Like if you're spending your time yelling at people about Redbird or Fox Sports or what Kurt Menefee has to say, they do not care about you. They are happy to have your viewership. And I know that we are fan-friendly leagues and that's all fine. And we sell $200 replica jerseys. I think mine's in the mail. But there's no reason getting so angry about all this stuff. It really is fun. And I really do have a fun time talking about all this stuff.
I just, like I said, I love the spin control from both sides, and trying to get everything aligned and trying to make it sound perfect and trying to make it look the best. Like, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, like that graphic sent out by the USFL about, you know, the 4% increase from week one versus the entire season. That's a little odd to me. I'm just gonna say that outright. Like, that seems a little strange to compare those two things, because that's a full season's worth of viewership versus what the first weekend, when you're simultaneously casting across against another league. So that seemed a little weird to me. But, you know, look, if that's what the information they're going to push out, fine. Like, if that's the battle they want to fight, fine. That's just what it is. But I really, it's fun in that, like, you can sort of compare and like talk about. I like talking about the idea, like I said, about like, how has the landscape changed? What are the viewership habits? Where are people going these days? What are they watching? What are they doing? What are they focusing on? Because that does interest me. Like, what, can you get other people involved? I do get people who ask me about this stuff now, which is encouraging, because last year that wasn't as much of the case. I do get people commenting on. I had someone, I was wearing a sweatshirt. I was wearing an XFL sweatshirt the other day, and for the first time in a year, from owning that thing, somebody, actually a random person, not one of my friends or my family members, some random person commented on it. And so, I've heard, I've had people ask me about both leagues. I've had people ask me about, spring football, which is encouraging. I like talking about that stuff, and if they want to know about it, great. That's awesome. That's, to me, that gives me a lot of joy, and it gives me a lot of hope for these leagues.
I had a question here, and because I had a point to make on it. This newbie editor, I haven't seen him on a lot, commenting a lot today. I appreciate it. If you're only watching one, what are you picking? I've said this, and we talked about it yesterday on here. Neither league is 100% to me, right? I think we're still working off of two halves of what the XFL 2020. That was my ideal, and I know it's rose-colored glasses, and I know we could go back and look at all of that. 90s WWF is always going to be the best wrestling I've ever seen, right? And I've lived through, 30 years. I've watched The Rock, and I've watched Cena, and I've watched Roman Reigns and everything. But, I think the USFL is a little too bland. I think the XFL takes itself a little bit too seriously. I think that they both could, that's why we come on here. That's why we do the shows and talk about all this stuff and what we would want to see. Andy, do you have any thoughts on that?
Look, from a football standpoint, I enjoy the XFL a little bit more in terms of the rules and in terms of what they're accomplishing on the field. The kickoff, the conversions, the way that they run their offenses, I really like the XFL. And in some cases, I really like the talent. And look, with the USFL, I think sometimes it feels like it's a little too close to the NFL game. And that's fine. If that's what they want to go for, fine. But I always believe that in these leagues, you have a chance to experiment. You have a chance to try something new and something that other people have not seen before, but not trying to be too different from the NFL game. I watch games like the CFL because I know it's different, and I accept that it's different, and I'm interested in those differences and how players adjust to that. That's kind of one of my biggest things as a football guy. That's what I really like. So if you're asking me, like, in terms of like the play style, I prefer the XFL. In terms of the players, I mean, that can vary. Look, I'm actually really excited to watch someone like McLeod Bethel Thompson this year. Because we followed him. Then this is the thing I still want to bring it back to, it with all these guys and all of these leagues and all of the ratings and everything. It's still about the players. It is about the players. It's about their stories. It's about where they're going. It's about their ability to fight through everything that they've had in their life and to get to this point. I'm rooting for people like MBT because he's been through the ringer and he's been to the CFL and he's been tossed around. I'm amazed by the number of people. I just want to say something about some of the people who I saw commenting about him this weekend. The CFL fans, like, people trying to throw him under the bus, like, oh, good riddance, can't wait for him to be gone. Like, the guy won the Grey Cup. Like, he was a starter for an established traditional franchise, and he put up numbers. I don't get the vitriol towards him. I think he's been amazing, and I like the guy, and I root for his success. So the players, it's individual player stories. As far as like the broadcast, I think the USFL has got a little bit more, buttoned up than the XFL. We talked about that yesterday. So there's a lot of different comparisons. I also could talk about positions. I made a whole list at one point in our group chat about a few weeks ago that I wish I had posted, where I compared the positions like overall between USFL 2022 and XFL 2023, and it was kind of split down the middle. Like there was times where I was like, you know, these offensive lines are better than this one. This defensive line's a little better than this one. These quarterbacks are better than this one. I made those comparisons. I think it goes both ways. So it's hard to say. I mean, I think just in terms of the football quality, I think both could do really well. But there's a lot of factors to consider there.
Yeah, that's the thing for me, and I don't get nearly as I know like Evan and Sam and some of you guys have way more player relationships than I do. I just don't like really. I'm not great at cultivating that. I'll say I think like Evan and Sam and you and whoever, like everyone is better at that. But I still know players on most of these teams. Like when I reach out to the media reps and they're like, "Hey, who would you like to talk to?" I mean, I was just yesterday talking with some of the USFL people. I'm like, I can scan down the roster and go, I would like to talk to this person because I know these people now, and not because And so when it comes to this, like hating on or not wanting anything, I want all these guys to work. Like Matt Mago's back on the Maulers. I'm not like, oh, boo, Matt. Like Matt gets to live his dream, gets to go play. I'm glad it's not with Kirby Wilson. I'm glad it's not with Kirby Wilson, but Matt's got a cool new uniform. They've rebranded that. He gets to play on national TV. Had a big punt he got to send me, and their special teams seem to be doing all right. Like I think it's great. So this whole I have no problem bashing the leagues because I think both leagues and ownership can figure that out, and it's not bashing. It's constructive criticism. But I have friends in all of these leagues and all of these teams I want to see succeed.
I think that one of the coolest things for me is you get more illumination on some of these players you never normally wouldn't have. Okay, for example, let's take Ben DiNucci. 3 years ago, Ben DiNucci played on my birthday on a Sunday night game for Dallas in Philadelphia. And I'll be honest, I half paid attention to that game because I'm looking at the box score and being like, who the hell's Ben DiNucci? Like, I'm not focused on that as a fan. I'm like, there's no Dak Prescott. There's no Andy Dalton. There's no, like, this is in the midst of like a terrible season for Dallas. They're not doing anything on offense and they're unappealing to watch. So of course I don't really give it much thought unless he, balls out, then I'll pay attention to him. He didn't because he was young and he wasn't going to play well. Like that was, and the operation was a mess. He didn't really, he didn't get to prove himself. And that was that. I didn't pay much mind to it. Fast forward now 3 years later, I know so much about DiNucci now. I mean, I know the guy has bravado. He has moxie. He's a gunslinger. He's got great arm strength. He factors really, really well into this Seattle offense. I love seeing this guy. I know so much about him. Like, this is the thing about these leagues. It gives opportunities, but it also gives more illumination to the people's stories that you otherwise, as a fan, especially in the giant conglomerate that is the NFL, you may not necessarily pick up on. Even as someone who loves football like me, it's hard to keep track and tabs on all these individual players because, quite frankly, all you're going to talk about is the same 10, 15 players in the NFL. You're going to focus on very specific individuals, not guys like these. That's something that I really take from it is you get to learn about these sorts of people and really learn where they come from, what they're like, whether their play styles. You really get to put more of a magnifying glass on them. And I really enjoy that. That for me is the most interesting part.
And also, to me, think about the life. And I'm a guy that I was never going to go into doing TV and video and stuff. And I had one conversation back in college that, really changed my life and where I am now. And, I just think of these sliding doors and like, think of the lives that, Ben and the opportunities now and all these guys. And, whether it's the coaches and, do you think Hines Ward was sitting there 5 years ago, like, I'm going to be able to coach? And, I know the Brahmas kind of stink this year, but, it's all these different like life stories and opportunities that all of this provides. And I do think that all gets kind of lost in this sometimes of just how different the world would be right now if we didn't have this for all of these people, that every single one of these people is their own constellation, right? And being able to kind of have the journey and, it provides a lot of opportunities, it's just even just the people that are working like XFL social media. I mean, Jay Noakes, like this is someone that, grew up loving this stuff, was a part of us. Now he gets to live his dream and he's kicking ass. And like I said, the Brahmas aren't great, but he gets to do a good job.
Yeah. but but he gets hopefully he gets free pizza or whatever down there, working for the team. Um, but that's the thing, right? It's opportunity, and this is something that brought me back into the sphere too. We've talked about this, our journalism background. I I kind of stepped away from it for a moment because I didn't know what was it that I wanted in it, and really what was going to give me satisfaction. Being involved with something like this very much does. It's something that really gives me a lot of satisfaction, a lot of joy to be a part of because it's kind of like a startup in a way. So you're part of something from the beginning, but also just like seeing these people that are not as removed from you as maybe some athletes are. Some people who are way more distant and way more removed because they have to be because you're part of like some gigantic public perception PR campaign. That's not the case. I mean, I'm shocked when I went to Birmingham last year and I legitimately had a player look at me and go, "Hey, I saw you on Twitter. I follow your stuff." And I was like, I've never had that interaction really before, especially with a professional player. That's not something that I really been experienced to. So that's something means a lot to me. I mean, they pay attention. These people pay attention to the media's work, which is why all of this matters too. This is why this matters. These people are watching. Players are watching. They're reading. The league executives of these leagues do pay attention to certain things, and like this is something that's really important for a lot of people. It's because it's so niche, but it is so important.
It is, and I think we'll see. I think the branding, I would like XFL to kind of get more into that in season 2. I'm curious kind of what I always think that the XFL is a little more, DCU than Zoa Energy or Terramana when it comes to like, what is our ceiling here? But I think they're getting into that. Anything else? We'll get out of here at the hour. I appreciate everybody. We got new talking, USFL anti-pizza, all that stuff. Mark is digging the all black polos. Asking you to San Diego. We're not going to get Andy talking about San Diego sports in here. We'll never get out of
here. No. I'll get that train rolling. I have not yet. I have been meaning to. I do think they draw pretty well in that stadium, and that stadium does do wonders for all of our sports down here. By the way, still waiting on that expansion notice for San Diego team. Whenever if the USFL or XFL ever wants to come knocking on the door, I'm still happy to have them down here. But that's that's something that I'm looking forward to in the future, hopefully at some point, because I really do believe that a market can work here. I really believe that, and it's gotten better. It's gotten expanded too. That's the other thing too with San Diego sports. We're talking about TV, just even like local sports in a lot of places where it's like, oh, they're building this new stadium because they're getting a women's soccer team, or oh, they're doing this because they're getting a lacrosse team, like stuff like that. People, it's just sports is always expanding in this country. It's always expanding. It really is.
Yeah, we had a comment here, a stranger talking about Cavante Turpin and then being able to go down to the field and talk. It was the same thing with when the Sea Dragons lost to the Defenders right there at the end of the game, and we're down there at front yard or front row at the 50-yard line, and all these kids came over to us right after the game, but DiNucci had just thrown, was it the interception or drop out, like right there, like and they're sitting there, DiNucci, come take a photo. This guy just lost, biggest game of the year so far. What does he do? Comes over, takes photos with them, right? Shakes hands, does all that. You would never get that in the NFL. You would never, you get that in the CFL. And that's why I think XFL, USFL, we need to lean more into that. I do feel like USFL a little more sterile. XFL, I think, could benefit from leading a little more into that. Anything else? I did want to say, don't think this is not scary. Where is it? Don't think it's not scary that the XFL drew the 235,000 San Antonio versus Orlando. So we got to work on that. I don't want this to be all positive today. Two terrible franchise, players are great, coaches are great, staff's great, but just two really, really bad. If the Orlando Guardians and the San Antonio Brahmas could play up to the level of the staff that are, they could all come together on that. But that is a scary rating. Anything else on the XFL stuff before we get out of here? I feel like we did beat the USFL ratings to death.
That's a lot of people missing out on seeing Mac Brown throw a bomb down the field for the Orlando Guardians. You watch the best throw by a punter I've maybe seen ever. So, but yeah, no, that is a rating they have to work on, and that's, I will say I'm not sure how much people care about like the records of the teams, because again, some people are not watching or really paying that close of attention. They're like, oh, Orlando, San Antonio, what are they like? And then maybe they'll see the records and go, oh no, these are not good teams. But that is a bit concerning. At the ESPN2, I feel like the ESPN2 time slot has not been great for the XFL. It has to be either be on ESPN or ABC to really factor in. ESPN2 kind of gets relegated a little bit here. I think that's something they have to consider going forward. And I understand ESPN has to fill programming. That's obviously the case. They need to finagle around that, but that's something that they have to think about going forward because that is quite a drop off compared to the rest of your products in such a highly competitive weekend. You did pretty well with that Houston Vegas game. That's good considering the circumstances. I mean, you want to see push past 1 million, but that's kind of what it is. The Sunday games are good. I think that's solid enough, but yeah, that ESPN2 rating is it's not the best.
A little nervous for that because I think one of the playoff games is on ESPN too. So a little bit nervous for that. The 500,000 ESPN, this 878, we need to work on that. But again, that was all the layered and everything with the USFL that day. And I do think that probably took a little shine off of that. And obviously, the podcast and kind of everything else around that. I think we did good today. We had some new voices in the chat. We had some old voices. I think we did good. Andy, did we survive this today? Was this a worthwhile endeavor today for an hour?
I'll go check Twitter to see if it's burned down yet. But if it hasn't, then I'm going to assume yes.
Listener Max just taught me how to mute because I mute notifications, but I got to get an Amazon Fresh order here real quick. I'll be right back. Just vamp for just 1 second.
Always being left in the dust, right? No. Listen, I think the ratings are going to be fine. And I do think that they're going to be consistent enough throughout the season. USFL has their established fan base, their established audience, and I think they're going to continue being fine throughout the season. Again, what's going to happen once the XFL playoffs end is that going to continue from the XFL audience to the USFL audience, the NHL playoffs, which, mind you, also the NHL playoffs are also on ESPN now. They're not on network television on NBC anymore. So you have to consider which networks are still battling for viewership numbers there. The NBA playoffs obviously are still on ABC and ESPN. A lot of competition there. That's kind of an interesting thing. I was just talking about like the competition between the USFL and the NBA and the NHL. It's interesting because the NHL now has the rights. ESPN has the rights there, and they put the games on there. The NBA has ESPN and TNT, and then also ABC sometimes. So you kind of have that competition going juxtaposed to Fox. So this really it's honestly just a big network battle between Disney and Fox. That's really what it is. That's what I kind of gauge here, especially the spring and the early summer time slots. It's like two very direct networks going against each other this entire time. So seeing how Disney and Fox battle it out here is going to be very interesting.
It's interesting. Yeah, I wasn't vomiting in a trash can in the Lux store. I was going to get my Amazon Fresh order. I am glued into NHL playoffs right now. Like you just said, they're on ESPN. I did see a lot of XFL commercials on that. So I do think that's going to boon because NHL, at least the first couple of weeks here, there's 4 games a day. I mean, it's an insane Stanley Cup playoffs. It's basically like they kind of overlap, but it's 4 games from 4:00 all the way till the one went to double overtime last night. It was 12:30 here in Dallas and Minnesota. So, you're getting a lot of that. So I hope that boons up. If you're wanting the XFL to maybe tick up a little bit here going into the playoffs, I know it's on the ESPN2 and all of that, but they're getting a lot of promotion. There's a lot of eyeballs on that right now with the playoffs. So Newbie says, see you later. I think I was going to say, yeah, Max taught me how to mute, not only mute people, but mute sections of if people aren't following me or I'm not following them. So I'm looking, my notifications look good right now. So maybe I could teach Mike Mitchell how to work on that as well.
I'll have to keep putting that work in. Last thing I'll say is I hope we can put in, maybe not now, but in the future, maybe some guesstimates as to what we think the XFL championship game is going to be on ABC, which you and I both will be at in person. So we will not get the TV presentation of that game. We will actually be there in person in the flesh. So, but we'll see what the ratings for that are going to be.
It's going to be fun. Thanks, everybody, for sticking through today. I think we did all right. We'll have our big show Friday. I got a player interview today and then a couple other people. Still getting it all squared away, but should be good as always. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Andy.